All right, so Adrian, we start off with the first project.
Cool, thanks, Dung. Yeah, so before we jump to the first project, we've got some boxes and goodies in front of you. So the one inside of the black box, that's the LaunchPad. So you guys can go ahead and tear into it and pull the LaunchPad out. And inside of that box should be a red rectangle, and that's what we call the LaunchPad. That is our microcontroller development tool that we're going to use to do some of these projects here. So I'll give you guys a second to open it. Okay, sweet. All right, I see lights everywhere, so I think we're in good shape. Awesome, so that means our LaunchPad is now connected to the computer. It's receiving power, and our LaunchPad is actually preloaded with some demo code. So there's already some code inside of the LaunchPad that tells it what to do when it receives power. So we're actually going to program over that example firmware or example software, and that's what we're going to do by blinking an LED. Which is something that we call a light. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that term. So LED stands for light emitting diode. So it's a lot of big words, but really what it means is it's a simple light. And that's going to be what we use to have the LaunchPad communicate back to us by blinking that light at different speeds and different patterns. So we already did this step. We connected the LaunchPad over USB to the PC. So good job. Step number 1 complete. The next step is we're going to move on to the computer now, and we're going to launch the software tool that Dung introduced called Energia. Energia has a little icon here, so if you can find that on your desktop, just double-click it, and that will open up the tool. And that's what we're going to use to create code and create software that we're going to put inside of the LaunchPad brain. So once you open up the tool, you should get a window that kind of looks like this. And the first step is to follow this directory or this path here. So if you click on Tools, Board, you'll have the option to select LaunchPad with this funny name here, MSP430 G2553. And that is the part number for the microcontroller brain that we're using. So we're basically just telling our tool on the computer what kind of microcontroller brain we're programming. So if you just follow that path here, and you can see a little screenshot, that'll configure your tool so that it knows what it's doing. Awesome. So Project Blinky. So again, LED stands for light emitting diode, and that's what we're going to use to blink the light. The LaunchPad itself actually has 2 of these LEDs. There's a red one and a green one, and they're down here on the bottom of the board. So you've got a red one here and a green one here. So they're really small, but once we program it, we're actually going to see that light blinking in different patterns. The goal for this specific example is we want to blink that LED 10 times, and 10 times only. So that's going to be our first project to basically show that Energia, the software tool, can interface with the microcontroller and do exactly what it is we want to do. So to do that, Energia comes with a lot of example code. So there's a lot of examples already preloaded inside of the tool. And what that means is that you don't have to write everything from scratch. You can use one of these examples, and if it's exactly what you want, then perfect. You don't have to do anything. You can just use what already exists. Or if it's really close to what you want, you can actually use that code example and modify it a little bit to create whatever it is you're trying to create. So the whole idea here is reuse and not having to reinvent the wheel every single time. If you can find a code example that's 80% of what you want, you should start from there. And I think that's a really important part of making things and actually being an engineer is making sure that you're aware of what's already available for you. So to find this example, just follow these steps here. If you just go to File, Examples, 0.educationalbp, Chapter 5, and Project 3 LED Blink. So it's kind of a long path. But if you follow that, you should find the example code that we're going to be using today. Cool. So I guess before we jump into this project and look at the code, let's think about what we have to do. So we want to blink the light, right? And as Dung mentioned, the microcontroller brain has these little pins or legs, and that's what reaches out of the microcontroller. And those pins is what interacts with the external world. In this case, it's talking to the LED. So if you were to draw a simple picture of kind of what that looks like, it'll basically be this little microcontroller brain. Just looks like a rectangle, right? Nothing fancy. And you can see it right there in front of you in the middle of your LaunchPad. And it has these little silver connectors on the side of it. And it looks kind of like a bug, kind of like a centipede. Right? And there's 10 on each side. And each of those legs or pins are connected to different components of the LaunchPad. Some are connected to the lights. Some are connected to the buttons. Some are just exposed, which allows you to connect external components to the LaunchPad. And that's how some of the booster packs, those modules that Dung talked about, actually plug onto the LaunchPad, is by connecting to these different legs. And one of those legs is actually connected to the LED that we want to blink. So the first step that we'll have to do is actually tell the LaunchPad where that LED is, so it knows which leg to use. And that's going to be the first thing that we're going to do inside of our code. So the first step is, again, setting the pin as an output. So we say, hey, LED pin, you're going to be an output. You're going to be outputting current through that pin, and that's what's going to cause that LED light to turn on. So that's the first step that we'll have to do in software. Secondly, we're going to do what we call a loop. And a loop is something that we're going to repeat over and over again. And in this case, since we want the LED to blink only 10 times, we're just going to turn it on and off 10 times to cause the blinking pattern. So I just said a lot of things, but once you look at the code, we'll see exactly what we're talking about. So if you guys take a look at the code today, it should be right there in front of you now that you've opened up that example. That's exactly what's happening. And the code inside of there's some text that's green in color. And that green text is what we call comments. And comments are meant for you as the user or the student or the programmer. And those green comments allow you to understand what's happening inside of the code. So you can take a look at that to kind of understand what's happening at each line. So now that we kind of have a better understanding of what's happening, we can actually click this little button here that looks like an arrow. And that's going to download that code that's inside of your software tool into the microcontroller brain. And then suddenly the microcontroller is going to do exactly what that program told it to. So go ahead and click that button, and you should see a couple of things happening on the computer. But by the end of it, your LaunchPad will have the new firmware, the new software that you downloaded to the microcontroller. And then keep an eye on the LaunchPad, because once you do that, the code will immediately start running. And make sure that that green LED blinks only 10 times, because that's what we told it to do. Is it blinking? Let's see, I see some head nodding. Did you keep count? Yeah, how many times? 10, yes. Awesome. Cool, how's yours going here, buddy? Cool, I think it's this guy right here. So that should take the code from the computer and shoot it through the USB cable into the microcontroller brain. Congratulations, you guys are one step closer to being an engineer. That's awesome. So we just blinked that green LED 10 times. So that's pretty cool, right? I mean, it's not quite as cool as a teddy bear hugging you, but this is one step closer in that direction. So now that we have this code example, there's a couple of things that we can change. And this is a good sort of a project to introduce a concept of reuse, right? With this existing code example, the green LED is blinking 10 times. What if I want the red LED to blink instead? What do I have to change? Or what if I want it to blink faster or slower? What are some of the things I have to change inside of the code to make that happen? So I'm going to challenge you guys to actually take a look at that code example that's in front of you and try to figure out what things you can change to either make the LED blink faster or maybe make the red LED blink instead of the green one. And by going through the process of trial and error, a lot of the times will lead to innovation. And I think that's something that we want to challenge you guys here to do today. So go ahead, and we'll give you a few minutes to dive into the code. And again, try to change some of these parameters here. You know, maybe instead of blinking 10 times, make it blink 3 times or 100 times. And try to keep count. So we'll let you guys do that, and we'll walk around and try to help you here. Cool. What are you trying to do here?
Well, I already made it blink 5 times.
Oh, man.
Try to change the speed. Yeah.
Speed racer. Good job. All right. 578. Cool. That's a lot of blinking.
What do you think that's going to be?
It's going to make it blink really slow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. You guys did it.
A lot.
So it looks like the first thing you guys tried to do was change how many times it blinked. And you guys went from 10, someone went to like 500 something. So pretty cool. Cool. Well, I think that was it for Project Blinky. So I think we were able to blink one light. We blinked both lights. I think some of you guys had them alternating. You guys were able to change the speed of the LED. And I think we learned a couple of things, right? We learned about how the microcontroller pins or the legs talk to external components or external things like the light. We also learned about loops and how things repeat over and over again. And I think we also learned about how to reuse code examples, right? We didn't really have to write everything from scratch. We were able to take an existing code example and actually modify it to whatever it is we wanted to do, which I think is a pretty cool concept.